We are happy to have you here. My name is Anne, and just to give you a tiny bit, I have one slide about Edlong. So we have been around for over 100 years, 110 this year actually, which is really exciting. We've got offices in Cork, Ireland, and then also in Querétaro, Mexico, but our US and our global headquarters is in the Chicago area here in the United States. Two fun facts about our company that you may not know is that we, in the 1960s, actually developed the first concentrated cheese flavor. So when you used to want to make something taste like cheese, you had to put cheese in it. And then cheese powder came around and that kind of expanded the capability. But concentrating the cheese flavors actually made it so you could be, bringing more deliciousness across the product development space. And then in the 1980s, we actually started developing dairy-free cheese flavors for allergen concerns with our manufacturing customers, and then also for export concerns, because sometimes when you're exporting dairy products, you can have tariffs. So try to improve your overhead and all that sort of stuff. We do the taste of dairy. So we do a lot that does contain dairy, and we work with products that are dairy products, but we also do dairy-free, which is kind of fun. And obviously the last 3 to 5 years in that space has been kind of a whirlwind of innovation and development. So we'll be touching on both as we present today. And next slide, please. Thank you. All right, so if you've worked with flavor, has anyone worked with flavor in the room? Show of hands, hopefully a lot of people. All right, good. We know our crowd, you're our people. There's a lot of different things that flavor can do for you in your product development work, but we'd like to focus a lot today on flavor being a problem solver. So, it's one thing when you work on formulating and then you add your flavor at the end to make it taste like strawberry or key lime or, sriracha, and then your product's ready. In a perfect world, that's how things work, but if you guys have, had any challenges like I have when you're formulating, it's not a perfect world that we live in or that we work in. So the challenge is when your product is not performing the way you want it to, but you've got marketing deadlines, you've got production deadlines, you've got consumer testing coming up, and you don't want to have to be delaying your launch because, the restock is only certain times a year, and your suppliers are going to either, win the business before you, or you don't want to disappoint your team. So flavor can help you fix problems that you didn't know you had, or when you are having challenges with things like off notes, astringency, and mouth drying effects where you don't want them. Challenges like that are kind of some of the things that you can reach for flavor, and what we're going to be talking about today is understanding how you can use flavor to solve some of these challenges, and then also when you start pairing things together, how they can work to make your products really kind of sing. So I will hand it over to Susan so she can talk a little bit more about flavor pairings.
Thank you. So flavor. So why does flavor work together? Is it your culture? Is it your personal prejudice? Is it flavor science? Well, really it's a mixture of all of these things coming together, and what flavors do for each other and how they taste differently together than what they would if they were apart. And of course, no person's taste buds or olfactory systems are the same, nor are their faculties for changing these sensory inputs into words. And because of this, learning about flavor pairings and gaining a good understanding is really like learning a new language. And as culinary experts, it helps you to express yourself, it helps you to create, but it also helps you to communicate and profile foods together. So it's also important as we delve into the topic that we understand as well that taste and flavor are not actually the same thing. When we talk about taste, it's really restricted by the 5 qualities that are detected on your tongue. So it's your sweet, your salty, your sour, your bitter, and your umami. But flavour is taken up more by our sense of smell. It's like our olfactory bulb takes taste and it fills in the gaps, and that's where the magic really happens. And when we broadly talk about flavour, we're talking about taste, we're talking about smell, texture, and trigeminal properties, like the sensation of heat on your tongue or the cooling of menthol. And so then if we go into that and we look at what flavour really is and how we communicate, attributing it really just to the chemical compounds that food contains might be selling it a little bit short, but it does give us a little bit of objectivity when we talk to each other. When we come to pairings then with basic tastes, we think of things like, for instance, sweet and salty. Think of your salted caramel. Think of peanut butter and jelly, or Chicago's favorite Garrett's popcorn with your cheddar cheese popcorn mixed with your caramel. These things work because of the way our taste buds and our sensory receptors work. Sweet and salty come on opposite sides of the spectrum, and because of that they give balance and contrast and complexity. Sweetness perception is also enhanced by salt, while the salt also balances out its intensity. And even from an evolutionary point of view, that mixture of salt with sweet gives you the brain a preference towards it, indicating that the food has various forms of nutrition contained. Sweet and sour is another one. Classic combination, and it works very much in the same way, in the fact that sweet and sour are on opposite sides of the spectrum. It gives complexity and balance to a dish and can form then harmonious flavour profiles. Think of things like sweetened lemonade or strawberries with balsamic vinegar. It's why they work together. But that's just taste. Can we go back? Yep. So that's just taste, and we know that taste is really just not the sole player when we talk about the symphony of sensory experiences. Aroma, texture, these things all come into what we talk about flavour. Aroma is not just those enticing scents that you get in a well-cooked meal. It's like they're the invisible threads that weave together a tapestry of flavour. They're come from volatile compounds, and when these are released, they prepare your palate for the diverse range of flavours that are coming its way. They trigger salivation. They give you the anticipation of taste. Think of the smell of roasted coffee or spices in a curry, and you know what's coming, and before you've even taken that first bite, and how important that is to how we taste and perceive food. Texture plays a pivotal role in the sensory experience. Having that interplay of textures in food makes it a multi-sensory journey. It changes how we perceive flavour. Think of something like a smooth, rich, dark chocolate truffle coated in toasted nuts. Those toasted nuts and that crunch don't only elevate the chocolate experience, but it gives a whole other dimension, a more memorable dining experience. As culinary experts and product developers in the room, you'll already be using texture to show off your culinary creativity and the artistry of gastronomy. I think as we go into this, we'll realise that really to make a memorable dining experience, it's very clear that we need to engage not just our taste buds, but our senses of touch, our smell, sound, everything. Yeah. So then, once we understand basic pairings, we kind of want to go into, what we're experts in, the taste of dairy, and why dairy pairs so well with so many foods. Dairy is an ideal base for this, for many reasons. Lots of dairy ingredients like milks, creams, some cheese, yogurts, they have relatively neutral flavour profiles, making them the perfect companion for pairing with more punchier flavours and textures. Some of the complementary qualities of dairies, like many of them contain fat, that fat will taste or coat your taste buds and give you a much more indulgent mouthfeel. The proteins like casein and whey combined with other ingredients and mask certain flavours. And then things like aged cheese, while they're not as neutral, they contain umami compounds. So when you pair those with the sweet, salty, sour, bitter, you get a much more rounded taste experience. Think of something like, an English high tea and scones with strawberries and clotted creams. Strawberries have natural elements of butter and cream in them, so they pair very well with cream, whether it's clotted or otherwise. Think of chocolate and spices. That chocolate, especially as you increase your cocoa content, gives the perfect backdrop for things like cardamom to come alive with the floral, woody, and citrus notes it contains. Or chocolate and chili is another classic one. As chilies age and become red, they get sweet, fruity notes, which complement beautifully with the bitterness of chocolate. Even think of chocolate and chili in terms of like Mexican cooking and how the fat contained in the chocolate can help balance out the heat in a chili or a mole, and that's why it works so well. But then of course there's the whole idea that we talked about, that everyone has opinions on food, what they like, what they don't like. For instance, who here likes pineapple on pizza? Who thinks they should never meet?
Yeah.
You see? But actually, pineapple and cheese are naturally harmonious. So the ethyl caproate that's present in pineapple is also present in some of the world's finest cheeses, like Comte and Parmesan. It's also present in wine and figs, which pair very well, of course, with cheese. So now those of you who do like it have a valid and scientific argument against people who say they should never ever meet. So at Edlong, we pride ourselves in being good at dairy. In fact, we say that we can help you bring dairy to everything it can be. We can help you build those profiles. We can help you bring that versatility to your base, whether your base is dairy or not. We can help you work with your flavours. We can help you mask the ones you don't want. We can help you enhance the flavours that you have. But from a flavour point of view, what I always like to point out is when you're starting your journey of product development, bring your flavour piece and collaborate with us or another flavour house early. Many people think that they get their base right, their ingredients, their textures, and then they bring flavour in late. I promise you by doing that, you're going to have a much longer workflow. You can even end up using flavour at a much higher level than you really do. We'll help you, we understand the ingredients and we understand how they come together. So collaboration is key. So Julie is going to take over now. She's going to delve a little bit further into the science of flavour before Anne brings you through a demo, showing you how we can take a simple plant-based cheese base and create something with all the flavours of dairy, and then further she'll tell you how we can increase that experience by adding textures and flavours in the pairings.
Okay, thanks, Susan. Okay, so I'm going to go into a little bit more about the science, some digging into some of the research that's done around flavor pairings and why those flavors pair well together. We can do the next one. So over the years, there's been many different proposed theories, and I think we'll talk about these each individually, but knowing that it's probably not just one theory, one reason why flavors pair together. A lot of these different things will combine to really give you that perfect pairing. So some of the most often cited theories are those around balancing the intensity of different food attributes. Also aromatic similarity, as Susan mentioned. And then also the idea of contrast. So pairing like fatty foods with a really like acidic wine. And then we can kind of break these ideas and others into these two categories of perceptual versus cognitive. So when we look at the perceptual theories, the first one is around intensity. So that intensity can relate to the taste, sweet, sour, salt, bitter. It could relate to the aromatic components that are perceived, retronasal. Even texture and aftertaste kind of come into play. And what you see there is that experts recommend balancing those different things, so it's not one thing that really sticks out to kind of dominate the food. And then another theory is around the aromatic similarities. This is one that we're particularly interested in, since that's what Edlong brings, is really like that aromatic piece to different foods. So what we see is there's some research done in 2018 where people looked at pairing soft drinks and beer with different aromatic components, either with similar chemical compounds or contrasting. And what they found was that it did increase the level of perceived harmony and complexity of the pairings. But one thing I feel like is missing there is that a benefit to consumers? So do people see that as a good attribute that they would want in their pairings versus just it being more complex, more harmonious? Another interesting theory is this one around flavor networking. So that's the image you see here. So in this study, 55,000 recipes were analyzed globally, and looking at were those ingredients, did they have similar aroma compounds? And very interestingly, they found that from North American and Western European cuisine, those recipes tended to have ingredients that were similar in aroma compounds, whereas recipes from East Asia and Southern European cuisines actually did not. So they looked more towards foods that did not have similar aroma compounds. So to me, this kind of leads to the second one is the cognitive approach. So these theories are really more centered around cultural and geographical matches. So pairing foods together because the recipe is passed down over the ages in your family, or looking at ingredients that are in season and local to your environment. So kind of bringing it back to that, the flavor networking, it makes me think, like, what came first, the chicken or the egg, right? I mean, is it that these ingredients pair well together and that's why we choose them, or is it because of the cultural aspect of it? Okay, and many of the suggested pairings out there are kind of from commentators, experts, really sharing their opinion. So as a sensory scientist, I kind of want to look past that when we're looking to bring products to the market, things like that, and kind of understand, like, is it the expert's opinion that still leads the consumer to like that product? So I really like this research that was done kind of with more a sensory focus. So what they did was they looked at pairing chocolate with different beverages, and they took a little bit more of a dynamic approach using a temporal dominant sensation. So the panelist is selecting which attribute is most dominant at over a period of time. So it's not just like one point in time, but their whole eating experience. And then that's paired with temporal dominant of emotion. So how do they feel at each point in time? So really kind of pairing those two things to say, what is the dominant profile and how do you feel at that point in time? And they found that even beyond that, it wasn't just one bite, one intake of the chocolate of the beverage, a sip of the beverage, that they needed to be able to like elicit this response from the consumers, but they actually had to have multiple bites, multiple sips, and kind of continue that data gathering. So I think this is important to kind of understand how we collect, analyze, interpret data is really important to understand that flavor impact to the consumer. And another important consideration would be your target consumer. So research has shown that younger children have a tendency to prefer sour foods. So something like this really intense sweet and sour combination of Sour Patch would probably appeal to that younger audience. While we see a lot of innovation, new product development in snacks targeted more towards teens, like these Takis that pair heat and lime together. And then, of course, you have your tried and true combinations that appeal more towards adults, like the sour cream and onion. Okay, and I had the honor of going to Monel last October. Monel's in Philadelphia, and they focus on really understanding smell and taste and how it's perceived within all of us. So this machine is created by the scientists there to attempt to map out the molecules that are associated with smells. So currently it's not possible to predict whether a given molecule has a perceived odor, which is interesting. So the teams there have developed this machine learning algorithm to predict sensory attributes, which of the molecules have an effect on their chemical features. So the results is that the model is able to predict odor intensity and consumer pleasantness. So they're still not able to predict what the aroma would be based off of the chemical, but they're able to perceive the intensity and the consumer pleasantness. I think it'll be interesting to see like what this sort of stuff in the future can do. So what you do is you smell into that little port, and then the consumer moves the mouse around to say that map up there. Is it nutty? Is it vanilla? Is it smoky? So they're kind of like mapping out the odor, and then you'll be able to see where the intersect is of those different aroma compounds. And ultimately, hopefully, we'll be able to understand pairings a bit more. So where is it that the consumer is liking those overlapping aroma compounds? And I think, just in general with these flavor pairings, it can really have a big impact on public health. So if we can understand, how to make foods more appealing, whether that be like adding different textures, tastes, flavors, that could benefit all of our diets. And ultimately, at the end of the day, cooking is also an art. So it's difficult to account for everything that the artistic creativity brings to cooking. Okay, now Anne's going to take us through our tasting. If you guys want to provide feedback, you can use the QR code.
So I'll give everyone a couple seconds to get that situated. I wanted to do some real-time sensory data collection because I want to make sure that everyone's using their phones for research purposes, not just social media check-ins. We having some success? And just to help with the process, we pre-populated with some common sensory tasting terms. We did do a little internal descriptive analysis with our train panel to generate these terms for the samples you'll be tasting. And then we can also get our tray ready. So you have 3 samples and you want to taste from left to right. So your first sample you'll taste will be unflavored, and then the middle one is protein, and then the one on the far right is flavored. We want to
Yeah, so if you want to go ahead and go through all 3 samples and provide the feedback on the link.
Should I move back to that list? And just to give you a little insight, this is not necessarily something you would be buying straight off. This is just kind of an exercise to take you through the development process when you've got your base figured out, and then when you add one ingredient like protein, for instance, and it can kind of change the whole makeup. It changes the appearance, it changes the way it feels in your mouth. Like Susan was saying, as we collaborate, and if we can collaborate with you, if you involve your suppliers in this development process, we can help you sooner and make things move faster. Are you guys noticing differences between the unflavored and the protein and the flavored? I see nodding. I see grimacing. Yeah. Saying starch and fat and water and salt is not cheese, that's for sure. The protein certainly helps with the opacity, texture a little bit, but then it can contribute some off notes, potentially earthy, beany. Even though if it's helping your nutrition, you want to add it.
Question. What does sweaty mean in its context? I've never seen that on a sensory evaluation.
I mean, sweaty is a common cheese term. So you would see it in like more aged cheeses, like stinky cheeses. Our reference is isovaleric acid. So it's a common component of cheese.
So you mean like literally tasting like sweat?
Body
sweat.
Like gym socks. Like,
okay,
yeah.
got
That's our
it.
definition.
Yeah.
Dirty gym bag. We also do pukey and baby vomit. Though that one I've learned my favorite term for saying baby vomit when you don't want to gross people out is called mother's shoulder.
Oh, wow.
So take that one with you. That was an eye opener for me. But yeah, cheese is fun. Working with cheese is fun. Sometimes the descriptors don't sound so appetizing, but the magic of cheese flavor in addition to actual cheese is all of these components are together, and the way that they get blended by the actual ripening process and the cheese making process versus trying to recreate them in other things that are fundamentally different from an actual piece of cheese is why I get up every morning and why I've been still finding excitement and fun in this even for all my years at Edlong. So, and I think that's why we're all here. So because it's interesting and it's different, and then people start doing things with hemp protein and what's some of the other weird stuff we work with, and you just go, okay, I've never seen this before, and it tastes really interesting. How do I fix it? How do I make it taste good?
Okay, most people completed the survey. Yep. Okay, so when we look at that unflavored sample, we can see that we're mostly salt, right? A little bit of butter, cultured notes, not really reminiscent of cheese, right? So then when we add the protein, so oftentimes you'll add protein for different functional reasons, but also nutritional reasons to kind of make it more like real dairy. We can see that some of the notes like beanie kind of jump out, which we would consider maybe an off note. It is even making it more cheese-like, a little bit. Some of those notes are coming up a little bit more. But then in the flavored one, we should see much more cheesy. Yeah, we're up around 20 for cheesy, butter, cream, a little bit more of like the yeasty notes. So is that what you guys thought is that third sample brings out cheese? It's more reminiscent of something you might call cheese.
And just to give you a little insight from a formulation standpoint, the way we tackle, using different bases and trying to figure out how to plug in all those different aroma notes and those taste points to make it a more well-rounded profile is, on the bench, we try to work with things that already exist, flavors that we already have. So what we end up doing is kind of Frankensteining stuff together. This sample you're tasting has 6 different flavors in it. And, if you would have told me 10 years ago that would be how I'd be formulating things, like people would literally lose their mind if you had 3 flavors in one product, because it's like, I can't bring in 3 new SKUs. My purchasing guy's going to kill me. What are you trying to do? And it's like, well, no, I'm not telling you to buy 3 different products. It's just we need to figure out what level works in your base specifically, because it is, there are no silver bullets in the world, at least in the food world. Salt replacement, sugar replacement, even flavor to some extent. So using those different pieces to build the profile you want, and then saying, okay, then we're going to combine them and concentrate them, or we're going to combine them and spray dry them because you want them to be a powder instead of a liquid. That's sort of where we find our expertise and our customers' happiness of, being able to develop that custom solution and still get it turned around quickly and meet those deadlines and, not miss that launch date.
Yep, and then we did descriptive analysis with our trained panel on these 3 samples too, finding similar results to what you guys just expressed. So when we look at that unflavored sample, you can see it's very narrowed in on the graph, so very low intensity for most notes. It's really driven by the salt and the overall flavor intensity, which would be driven by the salt. Then the protein sample, you can see some spikes in the beanie, the starch, the cardboard, a little bit more in the dairy as you guys commented, but really still driven by the salt, and then now the beaniness, which is characteristic of the protein that was added. And then we can see the flavored sample in green really like kind of pulls out those dairy notes. So now we have some butter, some cultured dairy, and the stars are significance levels. So you can see that almost every attribute significantly changes by adding that flavored ingredient. And we still have a lot of salts. And then also I think it's interesting to see that our basic tastes, our sweet, sour, salt, and bitter, were all affected by that flavor. So all we're adding is that aromatic component, but it also affects the non-volatiles, how they're perceived. So, it all works together.
And since you guys are all our best friends now, you get to see the sample we'll be serving at the trade show booth later today. So you get to see a picture of it. You don't get a taste preview. But if you do want to learn some more, we will be featuring some of this plant-based Emmental. We were using Emmental as the characterizing flavor. I don't know if anyone picked that out specifically necessarily. But that's sort of the fun of being able to customize of, you have this neutral base, you've added the protein, and then you can take it in lots of different directions. So, from our perspective in terms of trends and preference, we picked Emmental, but you could turn it into Gorgonzola, or you could turn it into, smoked Gouda, whatever direction you'd like to take it. So we've got this cheese that you've already tasted, and then we're going to be mixing that with a little bit of bacon jam. So, smoky, meaty, a little bit of coffee, maple syrup, cider vinegar, a little tangy. So, adding more complexity and layering. And then it also swirling the bacon jam into the cheese changes the texture. And then we're piping it into a savory eclair. So it's a cheese flavored eclair. And we'll serve those warm. So then there'll be a temperature difference too. So that is just something we wanted to give you the highlight from, because we hope everyone comes to the trade show. And we're happy to answer questions. I haven't to see if we have time. Yeah, we're doing okay on time. Oh yeah, no. So the question, if you guys didn't hear, is using a lot of different flavors can be challenging, and is there a limit to how much you can eventually combine? And some of that is yes. I'm also not a flavor chemist, so I'm not going to be throwing my very intelligent colleagues under the bus and saying yes, we can combine it all. But every situation is different, because some of it depends on what your product restrictions are. Do you have regulatory concerns that you're trying to achieve? Obviously everyone is aware that regulatory has become a much more important focus in our lives. You don't want your product getting recalled, because that's a real not great day. So yeah, I don't know if there is an absolute maximum. I mean, I've seen our chemists do 7-8 flavors in combination, but then there's also, you get to the point where there might be interactions with the actual flavor compounds, and that's sort of where things get tricky, and also where I don't have the experience. So I'm not able to speak to, but that's sort of the thing of like talking with your experts, and then figuring out the best solutions.
I think just to add to that, I think that comes back to the collaboration piece from early on. If we can understand what your end profile is, what you're trying to achieve, what your restrictions are, and that might be the form of your flavors, what you're allowed buy-in, whether it's 1 or 2 or 3 flavors, but also what your cost and use restrictions are. If we can work with you early, we can look at those interactions that Anne is talking about, how it interacts with your ingredients in your base. We can advise you on when to add the flavor, because when you add the flavor can have a massive impact of how it comes out later and how it's protected and how it lasts. So again, just not leaving flavor to your last thought is really, really important to make that end product really sing.
And sometimes it's a product manufacturing issue. Like we had a customer that was looking for a cream cheese, shelf-stable cream cheese icing, and they wanted to be, rich and creamy cream cheese. When they ran it in production, it was fantastic, and then 3 months down the line, they were getting all these consumer feedback and complaints about, this doesn't taste like cream cheese. So what happened was that there were components in the cream cheese flavor that were, basically kind of getting swallowed up by the other ingredients in the frosting, and we ended up working with using a compound that was common for feta cheese, to give it a cream cheese note. And, you know, that's obviously not the first or second or fifth thing you would think of when you're trying to formulate for cream cheese, but it just so happened that those aroma compounds had a better shelf life and they weren't negatively interacting. So, you know, when you're putting natural flavor on your product label, you know, only your company needs to know that it's natural feta flavor. So that, you know, kind of protects your IP, and then, you know, also will give you the solutions that you're looking for. Yes.
For savory cheese trends, what's the hot cheese? What's the cheese that we should all know about right now?
Oh my gosh, that's a really big question. I have cheese manufacturers in the room, so I gotta watch what I'm saying. You know, people like specialty stuff. I mean,
Or are there certain cultures cheese that, like, can you do a cotija flavor even?
oh yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I was that you read my mind, because that's been, I feel like street corn or elotes profiles have been popping up everywhere. You know, Trader Joe's has a seasoning, Costco has a street corn dip. I mean, even Cheetos is doing a Mexican street corn, and I think they're maybe not an LTO anymore. It might be part of the regular lineup. My personal gripe with some of the street corn things I've seen in the market is it doesn't really taste like cotija cheese, and that for me, you know, growing up in the Chicago area and, you know, knowing the guy on the corner pushing the cart with the elotes in it, you know, you need that cotija pop. So, you know, cotija can be challenging from a sourcing standpoint, from a micro standpoint. You know, that's sort of the challenge with specialty cheese in general. Like, having the greatest idea with this fancy cheese is wonderful, but when you find out that there isn't enough produced in the world to actually put into your product, you know, and the production scale cannot be increased that quickly, saying, okay, we're going to use a standard Parmesan and then add the age notes of the Reggiano, or, you know, I mean, that's sort of where you get to be creative, or we get to be creative. You know, how can we achieve this goal, achieve this taste profile with the resources that we have versus, you know, the fine dining of, oh, we're just going to shave, you know, 3 pounds of truffle on top of it, and then it'll be good, because, you know, that's one thing when you're Thomas Keller, but, you know, when you're launching it across every grocery store in the U.S., you know, there has to be some concessions made, but we can still make it delicious. That's, you know, that's for sure. Like I said, that's why I get up every day. So I hope that made sense. Yeah, from a trends perspective, I mean, we could talk cheese all day, but yeah.
Do you find yourself doing a lot more mapping exercises on the manufacturing side or on the food service side? Literally going to your end client, because I was thinking about what you were saying with trying to, everything's a math problem, right? Trying to find you behind the equal signs for the consumer experience.
Yeah.
So you're finding new technologies, you're finding new ways to increase better flavors, maybe better ingredient declaration, and yet the consumer might say it still tastes like the elote I remember, or you know, so you don't see the lift. So like, is there a lot of complexity in that, or do you just lean more on the manufacturing side so it's scale versus going directly to the food service customer who might have less scale? Because that's where it gets fun. Is someone's got to sign off on this, you know, on this capex to actually do more of this work. Am I making sense there? As it relates how you all lean in with your technologies here?
Yeah, so are you asking like how we get the feedback from consumers to
Yeah.
know like the flavor profiles?
It's probably
Yeah.
less important on the manufacturing side because your you know, your customer's different in that way versus you know, does this apply heavily in the food service space if you were calling on, I don't know, for giggles, Burger King?
Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely comes into play. I think, you know, you go to that consumer, so those consumers might be different, you know, so we can't rely on what somebody says in one section, one response to just, it's gonna be our only cheddar flavor now because that one person or one group of subset of people said that. We do rely a lot on our customers, like, so, you know, we're B2B, so like
Okay.
what is our customer saying their needs are, that they've done the research, they understand their consumer, and that helps us as well. We look at like what's out there in the market. That helps a lot too, and it helps to guide our customers as well. So like we'll understand kind of like the world of cheese puffs, like cheddar cheese puffs, like what are the different profiles of the cheese, and then we kind of share that with our customers, and sometimes that helps they get an idea of, oh, I want to be in this like processed cheese buttery category versus the aged cheese. Does that answer your question?
It helps.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of curious, like, just in my past life, having this type of science being pulled forward on the food service side has been more of a challenge versus the atypical executive intuition. My gut says, just add more salt. My gut says,
Yeah.
add more sugar. My gut says, add more umami.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of what I was going to lead into in a reverse kind of way, but
I
I'm just
see.
curious.
Yeah, I mean, it's all a balancing act, right? And yeah, I mean, I think we have to, consider our formulas as a whole, and can you add more salt, can you add more sugar, and how that then interacts with the flavor.
So the only other question I had was really around ingredient declaration, just in thinking about plant-based versus, direct from cow. Which obviously I'm biased, I still would like to go directly to the cow, but how fast is it growing? How fast is the space growing, making that conversion to plant-based? Are you seeing a fast uptick in people adopting plant-based cheeses and
I think it's always evolving. I mean, we've done plant-based before it was cool, before it was even called plant-based, honestly. And that was, again, because of manufacturing restrictions. It was also for kosher for Jewish dietary law concerns. You want cheese on your cheeseburger, but you can't mix meat and milk. So the advantage for us was that we had a whole arsenal of products that are ready when all this plant-based stuff really got going. And even just with our current customer base, people are buying dairy-free dairy flavors because they work in their product. And maybe generally flavor usage level is at such a low amount in your finished product, it's towards the end of the ingredient deck. So they're not buying our flavor to say, made with real cheese. And that's sort of where you have to, again, start asking questions about, well, what are you claiming on your label and what are you expecting this ingredient to do? Because, if you're using the flavor at 24%, that's not gonna get you that made with real cheese claim, which is still important for the consumer. But that being said, dairy-free dairy flavors can be labeled as natural. They still fit in with all the other, boxes that everyone wants to check and all the different, non-GMO project verified and organic certified and all the, you need bunnies and hearts and butterflies and, all the stuff, your package needs to look like a box of Lucky Charms regardless of whether you want it to or not. And I mean that I think is still evolving, but it also, I don't think it's ever going to go away, because at this point people are so much, to some extent, I don't know, I kind of go back and forth in terms of are people actually reading the labels, but I've been at Target myself, watching a mom go, well, we can't buy those fruit snacks because they have corn syrup in them, and I'm just like, I don't think my mom knew what corn syrup was.
Right.
So that, the consumer has changed, things have evolved, and, you sort of have to figure out where the importance lies, and, but I spend more time double checking stuff with regulatory than I do wondering, can I actually make this taste good? Because that's always my challenge, and as I've, spent more time on this side of the industry than I, my restaurant days are, in the very distant past at this point. If you would have told me 25 years ago, you're going to be best friends with your regulatory guys, and I'd be like, what's a regulatory guy? Spec sheets, like what on earth is this? But that's, the worst feeling of the world when you do all this work to say, I've got this great product, and then they come back and go, oh, well, it needs to be, gluten-free and organic certified, and you go, okay, that changes the tools in my toolbox that I can be reaching for. So if I would have known that in the first place, so I'm that annoying vendor that's like, they're like, send me your best cheddar flavor, and I'm like, I'm going to send you 40 questions first, because not only do we have a lot of cheddars to choose from, and obviously cheddar is not the same across the board, And that goes with every single cheese. I mean, we've seen it with mozzarella, we've seen it with provolone, we've seen it with, you know, UHT milk that comes from Canada versus what you buy at the grocery store in the US versus what they drink in Ireland versus what they drink in Mexico. I mean, it's all different, and having those data touch points and that level of detail, it's a pain in the ass, and I apologize. And you don't have to answer every of the 40 questions, but any sort of insight that you can share to help me do my job better, faster, get you samples quicker, give you 3 things instead of 9 to choose from. I mean, that's sort of the other part. You know, let us use our expertise to try to get you the best solution faster. Because we're happy to iterate until the cows come home. But, you know, and at the end of the day, everyone's got so many things coming at them from every angle, and if we can find you what you need in a quicker way, then, you know, that's what we're here. Use us.
And sorry, just to add on for your question about the plant-based space, I think to Ann's point, like there is definitely a market there. There's a lot of people out there looking, you know, for environmental reasons, dietary reasons. So I think we as an industry need to keep pushing to make it better. You know, there's a lot of innovation out there about texture, the melt of cheese, but then it creates flavor challenges, right? So kind of like working together, we found we can kind of, you know, help move some of those products forward.
I think as well, I think just to add on to Julie's point as well, particularly in Europe, we're seeing a much bigger trend now away from 100% plant-based diets into more that flexitarian approach. And so what's happening, especially in spaces like plant-based cheese, that flexitarian customer isn't happy just to take, well, now I can have some form of cheese. They might have cheese on a Tuesday, but they're doing a plant-based day on a Wednesday. So that product is no longer comparable. So now they're looking for more. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing people wanting hybrid products. We did an ice cream demo last year at FIE that was half dairy and half plant-based, and brought them together and, you know, built back in the full dairy profile, because people are looking to reduce and not just completely go plant-based, but that's making it a much harder space to work in.
Yeah, and then in that case, I feel like it's about educating the consumers, because some people won't understand why there's some dairy in there, but I can't have any dairy. But if it's lactose free, can I have it? Like, just kind of explaining why we're putting out the products that we are. There's been analog cheese, especially in Mexico, for years, and that was always just like kind of what you guys tasted, like a starch-based system that then they would add real dairy flavors into. So, like, is that a piece that we can create like a better tasting product with cleaner base ingredients to kind of like get those benefits across in different ways.
Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Thank you.